Dale Henderson had lived his entire life under the same Kansas sky, a man of early mornings, cracked hands, and quiet fields that stretched farther than the eye could see. His world was simple: crops, fences, and his loyal dog, Mac. But one afternoon, that simple world began to shift in a way he could never have imagined. He was mending fence posts along the tree line when Max came bounding out of the woods, tail wagging proudly, a strange dark rock clamped between his jaws. Dale chuckled at first, thinking it was just another old lump of clay or coal. But when he took it from the dog's mouth, his expression changed. It was heavier than it looked, unnaturally heavy, and carried a sharp metallic smell that clung to his finger. Over the next few days, Max did it again, and again. Each time he disappeared into the same patch of forest, returning with another one of those strange stones, dark, smooth, and cold as steel. Dale stacked them on his porch in an old feed bucket, telling himself they were probably just iron ore. But deep down, something about them didn't sit right. Then, one morning as the sunrise painted his fields gold, he noticed something else when he knocked two of the rocks together. They rang. A clear metallic ping, unlike any stone he'd ever handled. That was the moment he decided to stop guessing. He loaded a dozen of the heaviest ones into the back of his pickup and drove 2 hours to the geology department at the state university. He barely made it up the steps with a box, the weight straining his arm. Inside, a quiet man in a white lab coat greeted him, Professor Chen, head of geological sciences. "What brings you in, Mr. Henderson?" he asked with a polite smile. Dale placed the rocks on the counter. "My dog's been digging these up in the woods behind my farm," he said. "They don't look or feel like anything from around here." Chen's smile faded as he examined one under the light. He scraped off a corner with his tool. Sparks flew. The professor's brows furrowed. "Leave these with me for a few hours," he said. "I'll run some tests." Dale nodded, left his number, and stepped outside. The air felt heavier than before. Hours passed. Then, just as the sun began to dip behind the silos, the lab doors burst open. Professor Chen hurried out, holding a folder full of charts and x-rays, his face pale with disbelief. "Mr. Henderson," he said, catching his breath, "do you have any idea what you've brought me?" Dale frowned. "Rocks from my woods," he said simply. Chen shook his head slowly. "No," he whispered. "Not rocks, not from this world." For a long moment, Dale just stared at the professor, unsure if he'd heard him right. "Not from this world?" he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Professor Chen laid the reports on the table, pointing to strange readings and elemental charts that looked like something out of a science textbook. "These rocks contain iridium and palladium," he explained. "Both are rare metals, found in significant quantities only in meteorites. Mr. Henderson, your dog has been digging up pieces of space." The room fell silent except for the ticking of a wall clock. Dale ran a rough hand over his face, trying to wrap his mind around it. He thought of Max, of that loyal shepherd happily trotting home with his toys from the woods. And now those toys were worth more than gold. By the next morning, everything had changed. Professor Chen's team arrived at the farm with scanners, metal detectors, and equipment Dale had never seen before. Trucks rolled through his wheat fields, men in hard hats marked grids into the earth, and news vans gathered near the dirt road. The quiet Kansas farmland had become the center of a scientific frenzy. Max barked excitedly at the commotion, his tail wagging as strangers patted his head and called him the space dog. Dale stood on his porch, coffee in hand, still trying to believe any of it was real. One of the technicians approached him. "Sir, you might want to see this," he said. They led him to a field behind the barn, where a small crater had been uncovered beneath years of soil and roots. Scattered around it were hundreds of those same black stones, meteorite fragments from a massive impact thousands of years old. The team estimated the field stretched across his entire property. The samples they'd collected so far were valued in the millions. Collectors began calling the house. Museums sent letters. One meteorite alone sold for $80,000. The local paper ran the headline, "Farmer and Dog Unearth Largest Meteorite Field in North America." As weeks passed, Dale found himself signing contracts and permits, working with geologists and investors, transforming his once modest farm into an active excavation site. And through it all, Max stayed by his side, no longer just a farm dog, but a hero who had literally sniffed out treasure from the start. Late one evening, when the crews had gone home and the fields were quiet again, Dale knelt beside his dog. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in orange and violet colors that reminded him of the strange shimmer in those stones. He scratched Max behind the ears and smiled softly. "Guess you were the real genius all along, buddy," he said. "You didn't just fetch rocks, you fetched our future." And somewhere beneath the Kansas soil, fragments of the universe still slept, waiting for someone else curious enough, or lucky enough, to find them.